I want to explore this, question of microaggressions and what, Douglas, you were just talking about how anodyne and banal one's creative output has to be if you're terrified of triggering a tripwire. Has anyone seen the Reddit image of, the caption is, me trying not to offend someone when I tell a joke, and it's a picture of someone with all of those laser beams, like, in Mission Impossible, kind of contorted like they're playing Twister, like so they don't touch the red line, and then underneath it someone has responded, my mother was killed by a laser beam, you asshole.
That's exactly.
So, Sam, when you were on my podcast, We the People Live, which I hope everyone subscribes to, you were talking about this in the context...
the one with Hannibal Buress that went
No,
so
it
well?
wasn't. It was the other...
Okay.
It was the other... One of the other episodes that you were on where you were... I was running you through some memes. If you do a Google image search for Sam Harris, what comes up are just a treasure trove of photos of him looking sinister, maybe with red, maybe like turned red with there's blood coming down your face or something, and things that you've said that people regard as being totally outrageous.
Right.
And I see I've
been following Douglas's advice quite well.
Yeah, and
saying the thing that can't be misrepresented.
And you were saying that there are certain that it would be impossible to be a sparkling and interesting writer if your criterion for yourself was that you were never going to write anything that could be intentionally misrepresented and taken out of context.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, the truth is, as Douglas gave us each iteration of this, that the final one is truly impossible to defend yourself against. I mean, it's just someone who is hell-bent on misleading people as to what your position actually is will find some way to do that, no matter how anodyne your writing is or isn't. So I've cleaned up my speech and writing a little bit because some hassles just aren't worth it. So insofar as you can foresee the hassle in real time coming your way as you're forming each sentence, I found it useful to just be aware of not making life needlessly difficult for myself, and that comes at some expense. I mean, because there is a lack of color and a lack of fun and freedom in the act of communication when you can assume a modicum of intelligence and goodwill from on the part of your audience, and you can assume that the people who are following the plot will defend you adequately against the people who are maliciously misrepresenting you. Well, then you're kind of free to just to have fun on the high wire a little bit. But it's becoming, it's gotten so bad with respect to my podcast that there are people who will edit the audio of my podcast so as to make it sound like I'm saying the opposite of what I was saying in context. So and then there are people who will broadcast those edits to millions of people, and there is no defense against that except to have a large enough audience that cares to push back against it, so that there's this kind of ambient groan whenever that happens, and people notice. But it's a bad job to have to do it oneself, and in fact, I'm now convinced it's almost always counterproductive to defend yourself, because it makes it's boring for all the people who are following the plot and who understand that, in my case, I'm not a racist and misogynist and advocate of genocide against all Muslims or whatever. These are kind of the greatest hits of my detractors. For me to say yet again in some form, whether it's an article or a podcast or a public talk, listen, I don't actually want to annihilate hundreds of millions of people with nuclear weapons today. That's not my position.
That happens next Tuesday.
Right. Yes. No. That's a few things would have to happen before we would have that conversation about mass genocide. So the people who know that you're not a genocidal maniac don't need to hear you take that particular foot out of your mouth again and again. And the people who are committed to thinking you're a terrible person are truly incorrigible. They're unreachable. And some of them have very large platforms. I mean, there are people who will never apologize, even if when they do it inadvertently. There are people who will never apologize for getting something catastrophically wrong in terms of damaging a person's reputation. So it is unwinnable, and what you continually send the message that you are spending all your time concerned about your reputation and the misrepresentations of things you've said, and it clogs up your bandwidth so much that you at every moment it's a forced choice between cleaning up someone else's mess, which took them like 5 seconds to create, or doing profitable and interesting work yourself. And so I'm making much more. I'm making the choice. It's not even a choice anymore, because the truth is, having pulled back from social media to the degree that I have, I don't even see these small fires that are getting set all the time. And what's interesting about the Sarah Jeong thing is that I think most people who are not on Twitter have no idea about this story. I mean, this was a confection largely of social media. The pushback, her transgressions, all of the carping about the double standard at the Times. I mean, maybe it's appeared in the Atlantic or some other real journal, but whenever I mention this to someone, because the truth is I barely saw it, because I pulled back enough from Twitter that I saw it, but it was not something I was immersed in.
But you have to be careful here, Sam, because in part your pulling back from social media is a comment which is like, most of the stuff doesn't really matter. And in the case of Sarah Jeong, if what you're saying is true, and I think it is somewhat true, it really matters, and thank God for social media in that particular instance. So you can't say either Twitter isn't real life, right? Because sometimes it really is the only thing covering something, and then in other cases you can get sucked into some shitstorm that just absolutely doesn't matter. And so if you're blissing out on meditation, you can afford to go right through it.
Well,
that was a low blow.
It's actually worse than that, though, because it is real life. See, I'm in the uncomfortable position of knowing that most of my life is, in fact, online. I mean, most of my reputation is online. Anything that could happen materially to harm my career would be happening online. And yet, I find the return to sanity, born of not paying much attention to it, so valuable. That it's like that, it's.
I think what you're saying is what you said to me when we had dinner in London during the World Cup final that
Right.
we lost.
Yeah.
You're saying that you deactivated it from your phone,
Right.
So you're not constantly. How you ruined your family holiday because you were responding to Ezra Klein on your tweets, and you had your wife and kids there. So what you're saying is that taking it off your phone is not that you're disengaging completely.
No,
from
but
social
I've
media.
disengaged to the point where it's like I was, because it was on my phone, I was probably checking it, I don't know, some humiliating number of times a day. I mean, it had to be 30 times a day.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much time that accrued each day, but it was considerable. And again, it felt totally justified. This is my job to pay attention to. I'm following all kinds of smart people. I'm following all of you. I see the articles you think I should read. I go ahead and read those articles. It seems incredibly useful. And then I see all the sniping that eventually produces something which I think, well, fuck, I have to respond to this, right? This is beyond the pale. And then, and Ezra Klein was one of those, right? But then I see that even in the best case, when one of these, skirmishes that takes hours or days that results in blog posts or podcasts or something, even when it resolves in a way that seems as satisfying as possible to me and my side, right, where I feel like, oh, well, I finally put that to rest. At best, it's getting back to zero for me. It's like, it's not like, even when you're winning, on some level, you're still an asshole. Right?
Yeah. But
and again, I say that knowing that things of real consequence, like what was so phantasmagorical about that episode with Ezra Klein was that because I was on vacation and trying to salvage what yet remained of a vacation, I was just paying attention to social media out of the corner of my eye, right? And that was enough that was the worst possible way to split the baby, because I was still responding, but doing it ineptly because I wasn't actually totally following the plot. But Now I've actually lost the plot in my own head.
Can I?
Brett, jump in and then Douglas.
Go for
'cause
it.
you've been